Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more epic sci-fi storytelling, and drop a comment below. What would you do if you had to face a beast no one's ever tamed? Now let's dive in. The twin sons of Gor-Dan 4 bled over the horizon like twin open wounds, painting the jagged cliffs and obsidian towers in a wash of crimson and gold. Below, the ceremonial arena buzzed with ancient song and the stomp of armored feet. Atop every ledge, every rise, the Tharnak people gathered, 8-foot warriors with ridged jaws, ash-gray skin, and war-braided crests, silent now in anticipation. In the arena's heart stood 4 figures. 3 were Tharnak, massive, stoic, bred in the agony of gravity drills and blood hunts. The 4th was not. He was leaner, smaller, standing just a pace apart, calm in a way that irked the crowd more than if he'd been trembling. Human. Flesh-born. No chitin plates. No claws. No legacy in the dust of this world. Commander Kale narrowed his eyes from his perch on the high dais. The wind tugged at his blood-sashed cloak, heavy with the weight of metals and bones. He studied the human with the quiet scrutiny of a predator watching a wounded animal pretend it wasn't hurt. Egan Cross, Kale called, voice like thunder rolled in gravel. You understand the right? I walk in alone, the human replied, his accent clipped and dry, eyes forward. I face what waits. I either bond, or die. The oldest of the elders stirred behind Kale, his breath rasping beneath layers of ceremonial bone and cloth. The one beside him, Elder Vaker, tilted forward on his staff. This is foolish. He is not Tharnak. He lacks our instincts. He will not last 10 steps. He has requested the right, Kale replied. By accord law he is permitted. Whispers coursed through the crowd like a current. Some curious. Most dismissive. One laugh echoed sharp and mocking. Zhervac stepped forward from the others, arms bare, flexing under the ceremonial oil. His tusks curled like scythes. He smirked, looking down at the human. You will scream when you see it, Zhervac said, voice laced with disdain. All your training, all your tech, will not matter. You have no predator's soul. Egan didn't rise to the bait. He didn't even look at him. Kale raised a hand and silence followed like breath after thunder. In the den of Orgul, Kale declared, there are no shields. No weapons. No broadcasts. Only instinct. You will not return unless the beast allows it. You may slay it if you can. Or it will slay you. Or worse. To face it and emerge whole is to be blood-bonded. A warrior reborn. A brother of the Flame Pact. The crowd beat their chests once unified. Zhervac snarled, stepping forward. I will return with its head, he vowed. Another Tharnak thumped his fist against his chest. I with its hide. Egan just turned his eyes toward the yawning black chasm at the far end of the arena, the mouth of the Denver. The jagged stone resembled a gaping jaw. Centuries of failed initiates turned to legend within it. A young scribe near the platform whispered to another. The last to try and return alive was Kale himself. He lost half his face. Kale's one good eye shifted. He heard it but said nothing. Egan moved toward the den. Kale stepped down from the dais. Cross, he called quietly, reaching him at the base of the slope. You don't have to do this. Humans were not meant for this. I know, Egan replied. But I'm already here. Kale studied him one last time. There was something behind that stare. Not defiance. Not pride. Something older. Something honed. Your kind fights with tools. With systems. With alliances. That creature inside has never been matched by any of them. Good, Egan said and walked on. The den loomed like a swallowed god, its entrance veined with black vines that pulsed faintly in rhythm with something deep below. The heat that seeped from within was wrong, humid, metallic, breathing. The 3 Tharnak initiates entered first, one by one. No one cheered. No one sang. Egan paused at the threshold. He turned, not to address the crowd, not to speak, but to glance back at the horizon where the suns dipped beneath the edge of the cliff. His expression was unreadable. Then he stepped into the dark. For a long moment, silence held. Even the wind stilled. In the crowd, a young Tharnak warrior leaned to another and asked, How long until we retrieve what's left? The other shook his head. No one goes in after. Kale returned to his place, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't sit. From within the cave, the echoes of the 4 initiates faded one by one, swallowed in layers of stone and breath and depth. Then came only silence. Hours passed. The crowd slowly thinned. Fires burned low. Even the elders sat back in their bone thrones, eyes distant. Zhervac would likely return bloodied, grinning, dragging some part of the beast behind him. Or perhaps no one would return. It had happened before. But Kale remained standing, facing the mouth of the den. He could still see the human's face in the dark. That stillness. That certainty. No posturing. No ritual growl. There had been something behind his eyes. Not arrogance. Not fear. Something Kale hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition. Far below, deep within the heart of the den, something ancient stirred. A vibration rippled through the mountain's spine. A faint growl, a thunder without air, kissed the edges of hearing. Kale's good eye narrowed. No screams. No collapse. No quake of struggle. Just the sound of breath. Not one but two. Sinking. Slowing. Matching rhythm. In that moment, Kale realized something that made his bones ache. The human had not gone to kill the beast. He'd gone to meet it. And somewhere in the abyss something old was watching back. The black swallowed him whole. Egan moved with deliberate steps, each one testing the ground, each breath adjusted to the thick, wet air that clung to his skin like oil. The den was alive. Not just inhabited, but breathing, pulsing, ancient in a way that made stone seem young. It exhaled warmth and something else, something laced with iron and musk and silence. Not the silence of emptiness but the silence of waiting. His eyes adjusted slowly. He didn't reach for a light. He'd already stripped himself of gear per the rite. No helmet. No visor. No comms. Just a sheath of woven synth leather around his chest, boots hardened from Earth's desert crawls, and a single short blade with a worn grip. Not meant for fighting. Meant for final options. The air shifted and he heard something move. Not a creature, not a footstep. More like the rock itself adjusting, like lungs stretching beneath his boots. He descended deeper. Behind him, the path had vanished. There were no walls, only curved stone and the glisten of ancient mineral veins threading the cavern like veins beneath translucent skin. He moved without fear. He had been in worse places. Not more dangerous perhaps, but worse. Places where men were monsters and monsters were just noise in the dark. This place had rules even if he didn't know them yet. He passed a ribcage larger than a dropship. Bones fused to the walls, old and cracked, scorched in places. Not from fire. From heat without flame. As if the beast had burned from within. He didn't look away. Every detail mattered. Further in, the space narrowed, forcing him to crawl, then dropped through a tight shaft lined with sticky moisture. He landed in a chamber of silence. His fingers brushed the floor, stone and dust and something softer. Fur? No. Sinew. Molted skin, thin as paper, coiled in tufts. There was no sign of the others. Not one echo. Not one footprint. He crouched and closed his eyes. Sound came then. Not to his ears but to something behind them. A pressure. A throb. It wasn't a message, not yet. Just presence. An awareness pushing back against his own. He was not alone, but he wasn't being hunted. Not yet. He stood slowly and whispered aloud, "I know you're there." The den answered with nothing. But the weight in the air thickened. He turned and walked into the deeper dark. Time dissolved. Minutes stretched like wounds. His muscles ached but not from strain, from tension. His instincts stayed taut, his every motion rehearsed. He hadn't expected to win by fighting. That would be suicide. But he had come prepared to endure. To last longer than it expected. To show that he wasn't a challenger. He was something else entirely. A low sound rolled through the stone. Not a roar. Not a growl. Something deeper. Like tectonics shifting in their sleep. He stepped into another chamber, this one vast and circular, domed by hanging crystals that hummed with dim internal light. Here the air was cooler. The walls were streaked with gouges, marks carved with such force the stone had melted along the edges. Then he saw it. It didn't arrive. It was simply there, as if it had been there all along and only now allowed itself to be noticed. It rose from the far side of the dome like a monolith of living obsidian. 10 feet tall at the shoulder, maybe more. 4 limbs, thick and clawed. A spine armored with jagged ridges. A face both alien and feline with 4 glowing eyes that stared directly into him. It didn't move. Neither did he. Egan breathed out once. He didn't speak. He didn't raise his blade. He didn't drop into a stance. He stepped forward. The beast's chest swelled. Its mouth opened just enough to show teeth the size of forearms. No snarl. No immediate threat. Just revelation. It could kill him in less than a second. Egan stopped 6 feet away. He reached behind him slowly and drew the dried strip of meat he'd packed into his belt pouch. It was nothing more than old ration jerky, salt-cured on Earth, tougher than boot leather. He unwrapped it and tossed it gently to the stone floor between them. The beast's eyes flicked to it, then back to him. He waited. Seconds passed. Then the beast stepped forward, each movement precise and heavy, claws clicking on stone. It paused above the offering, looked again at Egan. Then, slowly, it lowered its snout and took the meat in its mouth. It didn't chew. It held the piece, then dropped it. Not rejection. Not offense. A test. Egan knelt. His knees touched the earth. He looked up into those glowing eyes. "I'm not here to conquer you," he said quietly. "I'm not here to prove anything to them." The beast moved again. Closer. Now just a breath away. Its claws rested inches from Egan's chest. Its breath washed over him, hot, metallic, ancient. Then it lowered its head. He raised a hand. The moment his skin brushed its face, the chamber darkened. Not in light, but in sensation. Like something vast and buried had turned over in its sleep and opened an eye. The connection hit him like cold fire. A pulse ran from his fingertips up his arm, into his spine, straight to his skull. He gasped. And then he saw. A blur of visions. Not memories. Instincts. Eons of emotion. Hunger. Fury. Loneliness. Not isolation, exile. The creature had been alone not because it wished to be, but because nothing dared to be near it. It had been a god, and gods live in solitude. Until now. Egan's breath returned in shards. He gritted his teeth. The contact broke. He stood, trembling but upright. The beast sat back on its haunches, watching him. He nodded once. The beast inclined its head. In that moment, without a word, a bond formed. Not submission. Not dominance. Recognition. A sound broke the chamber's stillness, a scream. Not of fear. Of rage. From deep within another corridor, something charged. Stone cracked. Roars echoed. Gervac burst into the chamber, his shoulder bleeding, his body scarred. He saw the beast. He saw Egan. And he lost what remained of his mind. "You dare stand beside it?" he roared. "You filthy prey-born thing." Egan didn't flinch. The beast turned. Its eyes narrowed. Gervac raised his blade and sprinted. Egan said nothing. Did nothing. The beast moved like shadow. It was over before it began. Gervac slammed into the wall, winded, his blade snapped in two. But the beast didn't kill him. It simply stood over him, eyes blazing, fangs inches from his throat. Gervac froze. And then he understood. This was not a pet. Not a trophy. This was a choice. And he had not been chosen. Egan stepped forward. "Leave," he said. Gervac scrambled to his feet, humiliated, and fled into the dark without a word. The beast turned back to Egan. They stood there, man and monster. Then together they walked deeper into the den. Not as hunter and prey, but as something far older, far stronger, and far more dangerous. The mountain above did not shake. But the stars beyond it would remember what had been reborn in its depths. The ascent back through the den felt different. The walls that once loomed with hunger and threat now seemed to breathe beside him, not around him. Egan walked slowly, his stride matched by the thunderous silence of the beast pacing at his flank. Each step it took left subtle tremors underfoot. The tunnel no longer closed in. The dark no longer smothered. They moved like two parts of a single thought. No chains. No leash. No dominance. Just movement. Unity. The apex, if that name even held meaning now, kept its head low, occasionally brushing its massive shoulder against the stone, marking it with scent, claiming its territory. Its four eyes, glowing in hues that shimmered between red and violet, never wandered far from Egan. They were no longer hunting eyes. They were protective. It had accepted him. But what unsettled Egan wasn't the bond. It was how natural it felt. The human mind wasn't built for the kind of connection he'd experienced during that contact. Thoughts, images, emotions, entire lifetimes of instinct compressed into a moment. He hadn't just seen the apex's mind. He'd stood in it, walked it, breathed it. Beneath all its rage and fury was an aching loneliness that mirrored something hollow in Egan himself. They were both creatures bred for conflict, shaped by isolation, misunderstood by the very worlds that made them. And now they were one. Not telepathically. Not mystically. But in a way more primal. An echo. A rhythm. Like soldiers who'd survived the same fire. He glanced sideways. The creature's breath came slow and even. Its massive limbs coiled with the energy of something always ready to strike, yet utterly relaxed in his presence. He reached out. The apex allowed it. Fingers brushed across the thick hide near its shoulder. It was warm not just from body heat, but from some deeper source, like the core of a star buried in flesh. Beneath the surface, he felt the thrum of a second heartbeat. Two hearts layered. One for life. The other, perhaps, for war. He spoke aloud, his voice hushed. "What do I even call you?" The apex stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the whisper of air moving through ancient corridors. Then, slowly it moved forward again. No answer. But it had understood. They emerged into a chamber near the surface, one Egan recognized from his descent. The others had passed this way. He saw the signs now more clearly, claw marks, blood smeared across a broken pillar. One of the other Tharnak hadn't made it far. A body slumped near the wall, half buried in rubble. Egan approached slowly, but the apex growled low in its throat. Not at him, at the corpse. The sound wasn't grief. It was distaste. The Tharnak had died dishonorably. Egan didn't need to look twice. The coward had likely tried to hide, maybe even turn back, and the den hadn't allowed it. The rite wasn't merely a trial of strength. It was a ritual of confrontation, of facing what lived within the dark, both outside and inside. To run was to insult the pact. Egan whispered. He wasn't ready. The apex made no sound. They moved on. Halfway up the corridor that wound toward the surface, a flicker of motion made Egan freeze. The apex crouched instantly, silent and poised, its presence vanishing like smoke. Then Jurvac appeared. The warrior limped, one arm bound in makeshift cloth, the other dragging a cracked spear behind him. His chest heaved. His crest drooped. Blood dried in streaks across his back. When his eyes locked on Egan, they didn't burn with hatred anymore. They burned with something far colder. Egan stepped forward. The apex stayed behind, but its growl crept like thunder down the corridor. Jurvac's lip curled. "You bonded with it," he said. It wasn't a question. "You." He trailed off as if the words tasted wrong. "You lost," Egan replied calm. "No," Jurvac raised the broken spear. "I completed the rite. I bled. I fought. I endured. You attacked your own kind. You broke the trial's code. The beast spared you. That wasn't mercy. That was dismissal." Jurvac's eyes twitched. "You cheated." Egan's voice remained steady. "I walked in alone. I came out alive. That's the only rule that matters." Jurvac charged. Not fast. Not skilled. Just angry. The apex moved without warning. 1 second it was at Egan's side. The next it was between them, eyes glowing, claws spread. It didn't strike. It didn't roar. It simply stood. Jurvac stopped dead. He looked at Egan, then at the beast. Something in him cracked. A piece of pride too rigid to bend. Too brittle to survive. He fell to one knee. Not in respect. In defeat. "You should not have passed," he muttered. "I didn't pass," Egan said, stepping past the apex. "I was accepted." Jurvac didn't move. The creature growled again, not as a threat, but as a warning. Egan didn't have to speak. The message was clear. Stay down. Walk away. Or vanish. Jurvac limped down another path, vanishing into the gloom. Egan watched him disappear. There would be no glory for him. But perhaps survival was mercy enough. Minutes later, the upper passage began to glow with a flicker of natural light. The exit. The mouth of the den. They paused. The apex looked up. The wind carried scents now. Torch smoke. Sweat. The scent of 1,000 eyes waiting above. Egan exhaled slowly. He was about to step into legend. But he felt none of the triumph the stories promised. Only stillness. He glanced at the apex. Its eyes met his. No fear. No hunger. Just readiness. Not to conquer. To be seen. Together they stepped forward. The last few meters passed like a heartbeat. Stone gave way to sunlight. The crowd had gathered again, warriors, elders, initiates, children. Kale stood tall at the edge of the platform, arms folded, his single eye scanning the darkness beyond the den. And then they emerged. First the shadow. Then the shape. Then the truth. Egan Cross walked out of the den, bloodless, unbroken, eyes steady. Beside him, the apex strode, each footfall rumbling through the arena like war drums made of thunder and bone. A stunned silence fell. Mouths opened. Voices caught. Even Kale took one step forward, brows lifting, expression unreadable. The apex stopped beside Egan. It sat tail curled. Not docile. Not tamed. Present. Willing. The elder Vaker rose from his seat. His voice cracked through the stillness. "This is not possible." Kale replied without turning. "It is." Egan said nothing. He simply placed a hand on the apex's head. The creature allowed it. A Tharnak warrior at the back dropped his blade. Then another beat his chest. Then another. And another. Until the entire gathering, thousands strong, pounded their fists in unison, a rhythm that shook the cliffs, shook the sky, shook the story into permanence. Egan looked up once, toward the twin suns bleeding gold into the clouds. The moment should have felt complete. But something in his gut whispered otherwise. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The apex turned its head slightly as if hearing the same silent voice. There were deeper shadows yet to come. And they would face them together. The wind shifted over the arena, rising in a slow spiral that lifted dust into the light. Egan stood without speaking, his shadow long against the stone floor. The apex at his side remained still, yet alert, as if waiting for some signal only it would recognize. All eyes locked on them, warriors, elders, children, the broken and the strong alike. No one moved. Not even Kale. Jurvac stood near the perimeter, hunched, bruised, his pride a scorched ruin. His jaw was set but his gaze held no challenge now. Only bitterness. The crowd didn't look at him. They looked at the human and the beast. The two beings who had walked from death's cradle not as survivors but as something else entirely. Something bonded. Something rare. Kale stepped forward. Slowly. His boots echoed as they met the ancient stone. The lines of his face were carved in solemnity, but behind his remaining eye burned something deeper. Memory. Recognition. Perhaps even awe. You did not slay it, Kale said. No, Egan replied. You did not command it. No. And yet it walks beside you. Yes. Kale studied the beast. Its breath was steady, chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched Egan's. He turned back to the crowd, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. What you see here has not happened in 1,000 generations. The rite of Orgul was never a test of blood alone. It was a crucible of self. To dominate the beast is to repeat history. To die by it is to fail. But to earn its trust, that is what the rite was always meant to reveal. The elder Vaker stepped forward. His staff tapped the stone with each motion, brittle hands wrapped around time-worn wood. His voice rasped like sand dragged across metal. It remembers, he said. It remembers the first human who walked these stones. Who vanished into the den and never returned. But the mountain does not forget. The blood, the spirit, the will. You share it. Egan looked at him. You knew. We suspected, Vaker said. The markings in the ancient caves. The records lost in translation. We assumed legend. But the den shows you. That is truth enough. Jurvac took a step forward then, eyes narrowed. So we are to accept him as one of us? Just like that. Kale's head turned sharply. You will accept what the rite has decided. You failed its test. You lived, yes, but without honor. He did not just pass. He redefined it. Jurvac's voice cracked. He is not Tharnak. He is not bound by our fire. No, Egan said. But I bled for it. I walked through what you feared. And I didn't walk out alone. Jurvac's lips curled. His pride flared once more, reckless and blinding. With a roar of defiance, he lunged. Not toward Egan this time, but toward the beast. It was a mistake that would echo forever. Before he reached them, the apex rose. Not with haste, not with fury, but with finality. It met Jurvac mid-charge, not with claws, not with teeth, but with force. A single swipe of its paw sent the Tharnak sprawling across the stone, armor cracked, ribs fractured. Jurvac gasped, stunned, blinking against the pain. The creature stood over him, one claw pressed lightly to his chest. It did not kill him. It did not roar. It merely looked. And Jurvac understood. He lay still. The apex stepped back and returned to Egan's side. The crowd remained silent. Even the fires that crackled at the arena's edge seemed to dim. Kale raised his arm, voice low and resolute. This is the will of the rite. Let none challenge it. A beat passed. Then a fist pounded a chest. Then another. Then 100. Then thousands. The chant began low, rhythmic, primal, ancient. Not in words but in heartbeat. They were not celebrating a victory. They were acknowledging a truth long buried. Something had returned to them. Something they had forgotten in their centuries of blood and conquest. Egan did not smile. He simply turned and looked once more toward the den, its black mouth now quiet. The beast beside him looked too. As if remembering. The rite was not over. Not truly. For what had awakened in that place had not merely accepted a human companion. It had remembered what it once was. What it once served. And the bond it had formed was more than instinct. It was inheritance. Kale descended from the platform and stood before Egan, closer now, close enough that their breath mingled in the still air. "Do you know what this means?" he asked. "Not yet," Egan said. "But I will." Kale extended his arm. Egan took it. The grip was firm. "Warrior to warrior." "Then walk with us," Kale said. "As one of our own." Egan turned to the crowd. He said no speech. He raised no hand. He simply stood. And the apex roared. The sound was unlike any before it, not rage, not fear, not triumph. It was a declaration. A return. A new chapter etched into the bones of the world. High above, on the cliffs, banners snapped in the wind. And somewhere, far from the arena, something old stirred. Something that had been listening. Watching. Because bonds like these had meaning beyond worlds. The apex stepped forward, leading now. Not ahead of Egan but with him. Together they walked toward the edge of the platform. Toward whatever came next. And no one, not Kale, not the elders, not even the stars, dared stand in their way. They waited until the last of the crowd had dispersed. The arena emptied slowly as though none wished to admit the moment was over. Even the banners stopped their flapping, still in the twilight air. Kale had gone. Vaker had retreated back into the deep stone halls. Gervac was gone, no longer enemy, not yet brother. Egan remained. He stood where the sunlight finally touched the den's lip, where shadow met the gold-streaked stone and silence hummed in place of cheers. The apex lay behind him now, resting on its side, its breath slow, limbs relaxed. Yet every so often it opened one eye to watch him, not for safety. For presence. Egan watched the sun set. Not the fiery descent of Earth's familiar sphere, but twin stars dipping into violet, one slower, one fast, dragging color behind them like wounded light. He didn't know how long he stood there. The cold came in behind it, subtle and creeping, and he did not move. Something inside him ached, not from pain. From weight. He should have felt triumphant. Revered. Elevated. But all he felt was still. Like a man on the edge of something too vast to name. The kind of stillness that comes after war, after noise, when everything inside you has finally stopped screaming, and what's left is not peace, but the hollow where pain used to live. A sound broke behind him. The apex had risen, quiet as nightfall. It moved to his side, its hulking body brushing gently against his shoulder, careful, deliberate. He didn't turn. It didn't nudge. It simply stood beside him and looked at the same horizon. "I've been running since before I even knew why," Egan whispered, voice low, barely more than breath. "From place to place. Battle to battle. Never stopping long enough to ask what any of it meant." The apex said nothing. It didn't need to. "I joined the Accord because I thought it would matter. Thought I could change something. Prove something. I never knew what. Maybe I still don't." The wind stirred. He finally turned and looked at the creature fully. It watched him back, unblinking, not as master or beast, not as conqueror or tamed, but as something equal. "You weren't what I expected," Egan said. "You weren't what they feared. You were alone. Same as me." The apex lowered its head, eyes narrowing, not in shame but in understanding. Egan stepped forward and touched its skull, his hand resting just above the thick ridge between its eyes. He felt the warmth again, the pulse of something ancient and wordless. It wasn't communication. It was recognition. A kind of mutual solitude that ran so deep it could only be shared in silence. "They thought this was about control," he said. "Taming a monster. Proving strength. But it wasn't. It never was." A memory surfaced. Earth. The training camps. Cold bunkers. Rain-soaked fields. The eyes of men who'd lost too much. The silence of funerals with no names. And in all of it, that same hollowness. That ache that only those who had seen too much could carry. And now, here, in this place of stone and legend, he had found the one being that looked at him with the same eyes. He stepped away. The apex followed. They descended the outer path, not back toward the Tharnak stronghold, but toward the ridges that cut along the horizon. There was no road. No map. Only instinct. The same kind that had brought him into the den, and now guided him out again, not alone but bonded. When they reached the ledge overlooking the lowlands, he sat. The creature sat too. From here the world looked wide. Untouched. Below, the fields shimmered with wind. Above, the moons had begun their slow rise, one gray, one blue. He could see the lights of the fortress in the distance, the watchfires like stars scattered across the valley. He wondered if they were still watching. He hoped not. This was not for them. "You know," he said, voice softer now, "they're going to turn this into a myth. A story. The human who passed the right. The beast that bowed. 1,000 interpretations and none of them will be right. The apex rumbled low in its throat. Not a growl. Something more like a chuckle. Egan smiled. It was faint. Tired. Real. I don't care if they tell the story wrong, he said. Let them. I just don't want to forget what it actually was. He fell quiet again. The apex nudged his shoulder with its massive head, almost a whisper of contact, just enough to say, "You won't." The stars emerged. A full night blanketed them, endless and still. Egan lay back, arms folded behind his head, staring upward as if waiting for something to fall. The apex curled nearby, coiled like a great serpent at rest. A thought came to him then, sharp, sudden. It wasn't that the apex had chosen him. It was that both of them had stopped waiting for someone else to fix the ache. They had chosen each other. Not to fill the void, but to walk through it side by side. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, sleep came without resistance. And somewhere in the dark, under the stars of a world not his own, Egan Cross, warrior, wanderer, brother of beasts, dreamed not of war but of silence. And in that silence he was not alone.